to welcome Shari Belafonte to the house. Thank you, Shari, for joining us. We love having you.
Nice house, right?
Yes, isn't this a great
big house? This is a good house.
It is a great house. I wanted to interview you regarding the process of your life. And I know that's not like a long process, but actually it's a very interesting process because you went from, clearly we all know who your dad is, Harry Belafonte. Your dad also had a documentary that came out 2 years ago that was
on HBO.
Incredible. I think anyone who saw it would know, and it was at Sundance, it was at all the different film festivals. So
Sing Your Song was the name is the name of the documentary.
I realized that you didn't grow up in a household with him, but in terms of a legacy, I'm sure he left a mark on you.
My mother was a doctor and child psychologist. She was also on the White House Commission for Aging and Youth. She was on the White House Commission for Native American Affairs. And she and Harry both have always been philanthropic. They separated when my mom was pregnant with me. But Harry was always very, involved with all of the kids in terms of he'd come to, a school play if he was available to come to a school play. But by and large, he always, during the summertime, we would travel with him. I would go to Japan, or I would go to Hawaii, or we would go to France, or we would go to Italy. There were all these wonderful moments where we would go on these wonderful adventures, and he was always meticulous about making sure that there was someone there that would take us on a historical tour and would teach us all the things that were important to that country or that culture. So even though he wasn't there because he'd be performing at night and usually he'd stay at the hotel, but we had quite an education growing up that way. I think it really has helped structure and guide me as to who I am.
As a person,
because both of them were very equally involved with understanding the world at large and not just being so focused on, making money or.
And I know him really from the civil rights movement, not from the music career that he had.
Okay.
So
well, that's because you're young. Martin Luther King and Harry were best friends. So certainly when I was at Dad's apartment in New York, and if Martin was there, he was Uncle Martin. You just see your dad on television marching with Charlton Heston and Sidney Poitier.
That had to have been sort of surreal for you.
It was, I guess, but I was somewhat removed from that. And other than watching the riots and watching all of that on television.
Did he try to shield any of you guys from what was happening?
He's never shielded us. He always wanted us to know how it is.
Now, was there a natural progression when you left the family, obviously, to go away to college?
Right. I started boarding school when I was 12. I skipped 2 grades, started in boarding school, because my older sister, who's 6 years older than I am, was going off to this boarding school in Massachusetts. At the time, it was called Windsor Mountain. And I begged to go, and they said, well, all right, we'll accept her in 9th grade at 11 years old.
And you wanted to go?
I wanted to go. I couldn't wait to go, and I loved it.
So what made you decide to go off to college and study in what you wanted to study and head into, obviously you wanted to go into acting?
No, actually I didn't. I was in production.
And you wanted to be behind the scenes?
I always wanted to be behind the camera. I always thought about being a director and a producer and a writer. I liked all of it. And truly, I took acting classes to understand what it is the actor does. My first job in the entertainment industry, I was a production assistant director at WETA Washington, D.C., the news division of public television in Washington. And back in those days, when your news truck would show up on Capitol Hill, whichever news truck got there first, you'd jump off the truck, you'd plug yourself in, into the building, and you'd stake the territory. And then any other news trucks that came up would have to feed off of your feed. You couldn't have a line of trucks from NBC and ABC and CBS and Fox and
like it is
now. Whoever got the truck there first, they got the territory. And because we had offices at L'Enfant Plaza, we usually always got there first. And that was my job, was to jump off the truck, jump in, plug it in, and stick the territory. It was right out of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And sort of saying that, I used to get into arguments with Dad because I went, I'm going to be able to vote soon. Why the hell do I want to? Knowing that, what's my vote going to mean in the process of things? And we would butt heads on stuff like that. He said, because it's your right. It's your right, it's your obligation to, even if it's that one little, to make a point, make a statement.
And do you kind of feel like maybe we're going backwards?
Yes. I do absolutely
I actually
feel
do
we're
too.
going backwards.
I mean, it's like a really strange time to be in politics.
It's just the most bizarre time.
Then you became a famous model.
And then Richard Avedon picked me out of a group of people to be one of the Calvin Klein girls It was right after Brooke Shields had done her commercial. She had the contract for 2 years. Then the following season, it was me, Martha Plimpton, Andy McDowell, Lauren Helm. There was another Italian girl that was very pretty. And we became the new Calvin Klein Jean girls.
It's easier for me. I forgot the word. When you lose your mind,
Calvin Klein jeans.
it's great to have a body to fall back on.
It was the first time that pretty women were telling stories on camera as opposed to just reading copy. And if you think about this, back in the 80s, 70s, and 60s, often you never saw the woman tell you about the product.
No, you
It was
didn't.
a pretty woman holding the product while there was a male voiceover explaining the product.
Okay, interesting.
This was really the first time that he shot these commercials on video, which, is that sharper, cleaner look. Everything else had always been shot on film. So he was such a visionary in terms of changing the whole thing around. And there was so much conversation about those commercials. I don't know if you remember, because you would have been really young. You would probably have been
very
5 or 6 years old at the time. But, the thing about those commercials was people talked about them. And people hated the Calvin Klein jeans commercials.
Yeah.
Why do we hate? And yet sales went up 400%.
How did you land the covers of Vogue? Not just once.
Richard Avedon.
Really?
He shot all of the Vogue covers.
Now, I know
And
you weren't
Scavullo
the
shot
first
Bizarre.
woman of color on Vogue.
I was not the first. Beverly Johnson was the
Yes,
first.
but I mean, that's still a big...
And she and I are about the same age. She's a year older than me, but she, I think, was on like 77, 79, somewhere in the 70s.
Yeah, because I think she was the first.
Yep, very first.
But I'm not sure that they've really repeated it. I mean, you've made the cover twice.
Four or five times.
Okay.
Yeah.
So...
It might be 5, but I know it's 4 at
I
least.
don't think that's... I mean, that might actually be a record.
Here's why, and that is, and we talked about this earlier, it's because I'm a woman of color, but not because I was black.
Okay.
And even though certainly you get categorized in this business always, there's no question that when there's an African-American role at the time, I was one of the people that was sort of put on the list to be seen. Truly, I actually had the editor of Vogue tell me the reason why I was getting another cover. She said, because you don't look black. And I was the first woman of color on Self magazine, and I was the first woman of color on LA magazine. But when you're in your 20s, going through that process of taking 2 hours to become somebody else by somebody's hand brushing, and then seeing that picture after it's been retouched, and going, oh my God, that's me? That's, it definitely inflates your ego a bit. What's funny is that, when you were modeling, if you got a cover, they paid you $125. $150 was a big, payoff.
For cover?
For a cover. And when I got Hotel, because I was on Hotel, I became a celebrity. Because, of course, I was Harry Belafonte's daughter. Now Harry Belafonte's daughter's on Hotel. And I was still getting covers, but I wasn't getting paid anymore. Now, I was a celebrity. I had to do it for free. I was like, but wait a second, where's that $150? It's like, no.
Wait a minute, so are you telling me
Once you became a celebrity, you didn't get
once
paid.
you become a celebrity, you don't get paid for the covers?
You don't get, no, I didn't.
Wow, do you think that's changed at all?
I'm guessing that it's not changed. I would guess, we'd probably have to ask Roger, but I'm telling you, I don't think so. Usually you ended up doing it you had a choice. You get paid $150 or you could get your credit. And if you got credit, Shari Belafonte on the front of the cover,
I would think that because
your PR
you'd be
people
responsible for helping to sell the magazine. I mean,
Sure.
celebrities actually help move the magazine.
Right.
But I guess it's an exchange
well, you're
for
still
publicity.
a young celebrity. I was still just on Hotel. I'd only been on for a couple of years. I was still making covers.
I mean, that
Shooting
couldn't have
Playboy
gone
was
over
very
well
different
with your
because
family.
I had to train like the Dickens to get as tight and as taut as I
Nice, I
possibly
see,
could, which I did.
Yes.
And by the time, it's so funny because once we shot it, Greg Gorman, who's a friend of mine, who's a photographer, shot the Playboy issue for me. And once we finished shooting and we knew we had everything in the can, I haven't worked out in a single day since then. Because I sort of thought, I'm 45, I'm as taut and as trim as I'm ever going to be, and I had a huge paycheck at the end of the day.
Now,
which
why
was
did you choose to do Playboy? Just because of the money?
It was mostly money. It was, and it's
Ego?
a little ego. There's no question. There's a little ego that's
There's
involved.
got to be a little bit of ego.
And you've got to have ego in this business. You just have to be able to control it.
How was it handled with your family?
My mom luckily had passed away, so I didn't have to go through that. My dad didn't speak to me for about 5 years.
Your dad what?
But didn't speak to me for like 5 years.
But that's because it's his generation.
Because it's his
generation, right?
My brother, however, who also didn't see the magazine, was very funny. He said, He said, "Oh, Harry, get over it." He said, "If they were paying me what they're paying Shari to do that," he said, "I'd get butt naked in Bloomingdale's window and let them watch me for 5 days in a row." So, and I used to say,
Now, do you prefer
not
television or do you prefer movies?
You know what? I like it all. I really do like it all. I love television because it feels more like it's a guaranteed thing. You know, when you're on a hit show like Hotel, you know, we knew we were going to work for 4 or 5 years in a row, which we did. We ended up going for 5 seasons. I still have a crush on Jimmy.
I know. And who doesn't
But now
have a
it's
crush on
like, be careful because he's with Barbara.
Yeah, but still, he's still pretty awesome.
He's pretty awesome.
So who was your mentor getting you into television? In terms of when you were in school, you wanted to be you never really wanted to go into television. You obviously wanted to be a director and a producer.
I did, and like I said, being discovered, Nina Blanchard was my agent at the time.
Okay,
and
Nina Blanchard yes.
was the leading modeling agent here on the West Coast.
Yes, she was.
She was friends with Eileen Ford, so the girls that she repped here in Los Angeles were automatically repped. Well, not automatically. Eileen had to approve, but obviously if you're somebody who's making covers and doing
this
stuff.
Is old school stuff.
This is old school. So I became a Ford model as well.
All right.
But I was in their special division because clearly I couldn't go out and do the kind of money runway shows that, you know, Linda Evangelista or, you know, Christy Turlington or Christy Brinkley or all those people could do. Nina got a call saying we'd like her to come in and audition for this part. The movie was called If You Could See What I Hear, which was a Canadian movie. And I ended up going to Canada to play this part. It was based on a real character. And his girlfriend, he was blind, his girlfriend was a black woman. He didn't realize she was black. So they were certainly going to hire out of Canada, but all of the black actresses in Canada had West Indian accents.
Actually, when they bounce off of beautiful 5'6", 110-pound objects.
112, but I'm on a diet.
So why did you decide to move out here from the East Coast to the West Coast? I mean, that's quite a cultural difference.
At the time, I was married to another gentleman. His name was Bob Harper. And Bob wanted to move out here. And I actually have always liked the West Coast. My grandmother lived out here. My father's mother lived out here. So we used to come out during the summer and hang out here. So I was used to California. And I liked, as much as I love the Berkshires, don't get me wrong, I totally love the Berkshires. I like the heat. I like being in the sun. I like the palm trees. I like the sand, the surf. I like the whole
California
thing.
Girl.
So I'm a California girl. And when you're in the entertainment industry, you have to be in California. At that time, you had to be. There was not a lot of production out of New York City.
Okay.
You know, you have theater. If you want to be in theater, you got to be on the East Coast.
East Coast.
You know, because there's not a lot of theater out here. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to beat me up and go, "What do you mean there's great theater in California?" No, not so much.
No,
most of the big shows that come in are truck shows that come in, so they're not the full regalia that, you know, now the Pantages and the Amundsen do have bigger shows, but there's shows that are here temporarily. They're not shows that have a home like the shows in New York on Broadway do. So if you want to be in Broadway and you want to be on the boards, you got to be in New York. And if you want to be in television or you want to be in the movies, you should be out on the West Coast.
Now, do you consider yourself an actor, producer, director? What do you consider yourself?
Yes, and yes.
Yes, all three, huh?
A writer, singer.
Now, do you
makeup artist sometimes? I've had to make up people. Hairdresser, I've done that before.
And is
a
there
photographer, sometimes, you know, I shoot behind the scenes stuff too.
Or do you not have a favorite part? I mean, are you somebody who's just, would you like to consider yourself an artist?
Yeah, you know.
Because an artist represents everything.
That's exactly right. I find myself, it depends on the job. I call a Jane of all trades, master of, you know,
I think that's fair.
Maybe nothing, but I feel totally invested in whatever that moment is. If I'm now Mayor Lomax, then I'm the mayor. I'm all the mayor. I'm nothing about being but the mayor.
Now, how often do you shoot for General Hospital?
I've shot 5 episodes so far. I'm about to shoot a 6th one on Friday. It's so fast now compared to when Sam was on it. My husband, Sam Behrens, was Jake Meyer on General Hospital. When we first started dating, he was doing the show, and they would shoot 52 pages a day.
Yeah,
and I remember helping him with lines going, good Lord, how do you memorize all of this? And they give it to you a week before, and you have to memorize all this. At the time I was doing hotel, those kind of shows, we did 52 pages over a week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a 7 day.
So it's a different setup.
Totally different setup for nighttime television than there was daytime. Well, now, forget 52 pages. They'll shoot up to 110 pages a day, and you don't rehearse. You actually go in, they block, and then after they've blocked what you're doing, you go down, you get into hair and makeup, you get into wardrobe, you come up and you shoot. So you have to actually memorize all those lines before you come in, and then you run lines with the cast that you're working with while you're in hair and makeup, and then you go up and shoot. And we shot 2 episodes. As a matter of fact, the episodes that are coming on Thursday and Friday were the longest that we've shot, and we worked from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And that was it. I was out by 3:30.
And this is a normal schedule.
This is a normal schedule.
For daytime.
Normal schedule for General Hospital, that they shoot between 85 and 110 pages a day.
That woman made a mockery of me, of my office, and of this city. I want you to put Alexis Davis in her place.
So to be in the movie industry, you really do need to be.
You have to be here because depending on who the director or the producer or the casting director is, they don't want to. Now you can get everything sent via email.
Phone. Okay.
But it's not the same. You really do have to be there in person. People will fly you out sometimes if you're really a big enough name that they need to see you. But by and large, if you're still trying to, make your way through, which I'm still trying to do.
What? Wait, you don't do casting?
Of course I do casting. There's a lot of casting directors that don't have a clue who I am because they've never seen me.
You still go on casting calls?
Sure. If it's the right project, absolutely. If it's a project that they don't need to see me, we'll get an offer or we'll say make an offer. But by and large, there's so many young people that are directing and producing nowadays. True. They don't know. They weren't around when Hotel was on, or they don't watch General Hospital, or they don't, look at magazine covers or know who Harry Belafonte is. A lot of young people don't even know who Harry Belafonte is.
No,
they kind of know him. I've had people come up to me and go, "I just found out your father did all the score for Beetlejuice."
You don't find that alarming?
I don't find it. I find it disheartening sometimes, but not alarming. Because this industry's always been ageist. It's always been about youth. So they always want to bring in young people. The agents nowadays are,
they want that. So it's all about the youth.
It's all about youth. It's always been about youth.
If I'm an actress, I'm coming to Los Angeles, I want to make it badly. I want to have a career just like you.
Right.
How do I get on television? I know that's like a loaded question, but that's the one
I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
Everybody wants to know this question because I think television is still the most powerful medium.
I think it is too, but we may be in
dwindling down
because
so
many people now, I know this for a fact, so many people have their smartphones and their tabs and their laptops. Netflix, has some of the most amazing programming on television, but you don't get that on just, your regular cable TV. You have to order Netflix. There's so many different outlets and avenues to experience the entertainment industry now that, TV's still there. It's still strong. I don't think it's ever going to go away.
Well, I think that's.
But now everybody's uploading and downloading.
For people that are coming here, they think it's going to be a slam dunk. Everybody wants to be famous.
Right.
They all want to get on television. They all want to be in some sort of a soap opera. They want to be in a television show. And I just don't think people realize how hard it is and how difficult it really is. I mean, you got to have an agent. There's a whole process.
There's a process, and really having a good team behind you makes all the difference in the world.
So can you go in blindly without a team?
Most of the time, people won't even see you, but there's always that, sitting at the Schwab's diner,
How do you get a team
getting discovered. It's not always easy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But
you have to have friends and family that help believe in you as well.
How do you find projects that you think are very interesting? How are you finding them? I mean, because is there
sometimes you'll read in the trades.
So there's.
I get the trades on my. Yeah, that's my tweet.
So there's trade magazines.
There's trade magazines. There's Hollywood Reporter. There's Variety. There's.
And so you're actually reading these
news.
articles and looking on what the upcoming projects are.
The entertainment
do you like
industry
the process? Are you involved, or do you just handle that to your people? Do you get involved in contracts? Do you get involved in...
I always look over my contracts because that is something that I learned from my mom and my dad.
Okay.
Was to, sometimes I just sign it off, it's like whatever it is, it's not going to be, it's like, fine, here, I signed it, take it. But if it's a real contract and there's involved stuff like merchandise or any of the stuff, yeah, I read every last moment. And if I don't understand it, I call them and go, explain this to me. What does this mean?
Do you think that's important to know? I think
it's an important thing for people in the industry to understand, but I think you have to be responsible and understand every step along the way what's going on for you in your career. You also have to get proactive in your career now. You know, back in the days when I was modeling and everything, I wasn't proactive. So there were years that went by that I would then find a director who said, you know, I really wanted you for this part and blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, why didn't you contact me? And they said, well, we did, but your agents, you know, said you wouldn't do it because there was no money, there was no big money involved. I was like, what? And of course, you know,
so how do you
it's
know
the
that?
sleeper.
I mean, if the agent is not passed along
right.
that information to you, how are you proactive?
The way
finding
you
out?
say this, you say it to your agent, you say it to your manager, you lay down the rules. And the one thing that I used to do early into my career, which really worked for me, was I would have monthly meetings where I'd have my attorney and my agent and my manager and my business manager and the publicist all in the room and say, all right, here's what Team Belafonte needs to know this week.
The 80s and 90s and now, I mean, do you see a big shift?
There's a huge shift. First of all, there's 50 times more projects.
Okay.
But no
and that's
money.
good. Oh, no money.
No money.
Oh,
I actually
so the
have
money's
friends, the money's gone because it's so dispersed that now you've got SAG ultra low budget projects where everybody is working for $100 a day. I've done a couple of those.
I don't understand how I mean, if I don't understand how that works. I mean, I would think that once you've made it, the money goes up.
You would think that, except what happens is that, like I said, unless you have, you know, you get sometimes caught. I'm not young anymore. So I'm not going for 30-year-old parts or 25-year-old parts.
Is that where the money's
and
at?
friends that want to make movies, you know, I'm in the Eric Stoltz movie that he's just putting together, you know, he just put together and he's editing it right now. And a friend of mine was a producer on it. She said, would you come and do this part for us? Because it's Eric's first feature and blah, 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 but it's a SAG ultra low budget project, you know. So you're going, well, yeah, I want to work with Eric Stoltz, but really that's all you got? You know? But all the studios have stopped making those interim movies that cost between $5 and $10 million to do.
Oh, really?
Those are all in.
They're gone.
Look at the movies.
Okay.
The studios are only investing in these big ultra budget projects. So people who have like a $7 million film, the studios don't get behind it. It has to be indie money.
Wow. So what you're saying is that you see that from the 80s, it turned in, from the 80s, 90s, that there's tons of projects. Multiple outlets now.
Right. Most of the movies
but the money's gone.
The money's gone. You know, that's, by the way, these are all gross generalizations. Once in a while you'll find the one movie that made it out of Sundance that was $1 million movie that everybody that was a sleeper went to see. But by and large, you know, ordinary peoples are not being made like they were. You know, you don't get those low budget movies anymore.
You're a singer and a photographer on top of being an actress,
right.
A model.
A writer, a dog trainer.
And being in television. Do you feel that you should have applied yourself more in those areas of photography and music and you would be in a different realm? Or do you feel you gave it what you want to give it and are you giving it more now?
I think if I had focused less on being in front of the camera, after I started being on the camera, and really continued my education out here, because even though I got a BFA in production at Carnegie, it was really from theater. They didn't have a television and film department at Carnegie when I was there. If I had just really stayed focused, so to speak, and picked up more behind the camera training out here, I would probably be better positioned today doing directing and everything that I would have liked. But by the same regard, you know, you still have a huge discrepancy on women and women of color getting their opportunities to be behind the camera, because again, it stems back to where's the money going to come from?
Well,
you know, people with the paycheck really want to know that their investment's going to reap them some benefits. So you rarely get the kind of money behind projects that have women of color or women that are involved behind the camera than you do men.
And do you think that's in television or in movies or in both?
I think it's true both.
It's in both. Okay.
We had a few female directors on Hotel back in my day, but I don't think it's anymore. I think it's still only 10%. You know, there's still a huge discrepancy on women, and especially women of color, and even black directors. being behind the camera.
Now, you do music.
We can really make it better, yeah. Only if we try. We can really make it better, yeah.
And you're in the studio now.
I'm in the studio, not this week, but in a couple of weeks I go back into the studio. I'm doing house music, something that I love, that everybody's
Right,
going,
that's great. I mean,
really?
really?
You're like a disc, you're doing, dance music? Electric
Why
dance
not?
music? And I went, yeah, I love it. And now I'm at that position where I can really say, no, you know what? I'm doing this.
And who's producing these 2 singles? Is it you?
I'm doing it, and then a good friend of mine his name is Franco Munoz, who was the #2 DJ in Ibiza a number of years ago.
Do you feel it helps to be with someone that's younger? Does that bring out a creative vibe
It
in you?
helps to have somebody who believes in you, whether they're older, whether they're younger. It just, when you've got somebody that has the same amount of energy and drive and desire that you do, it's kind of golden.
So you don't see yourself doing any like galleries with your photography exhibits?
I've had gallery shows before, and will again. So I'll have another show on the West Coast here in Palm Springs, and then I have friends who own a gallery in New York that I'll also show in probably next year.
So we're going to be looking for you in the gallery, Shari.
Look for me everywhere.
We're going to be looking for you everywhere, Shari.
And tweet me.
Yes.
Get on my Twitter page.
So where does Shari the artist go from here?
Home to cook dinner,
I mean, like,
do some dishes, a little laundry.
You're everything. I mean, you're doing music, you do photography, you do acting, you've done modeling. I mean, like, what area have you not touched?
Right now, I'm going home to learn massive lines for Friday because, Meryl Lomax is, back at it again.